Hello, I'm April Ingle, and I'm the Advocacy Director at River Network. And today I am so excited to be here with Justinn Overton, who is the Executive Director and Riverkeeper with Coosa Riverkeeper. And she is here today to share her story of state policy advocacy success. And that's resulted in the groundbreaking Safe and Healthy Outdoor Recreation Act. So, Justinn, tell me the story of Alabama's Safe and Healthy Outdoor Recreation Act.
Well, it started a long time ago. It started, honestly, when I was like 8 years old, which I know sounds like, how is this relevant? But my family is from Anniston, Alabama, which is where PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, were first commercially manufactured. So my family was a part of that huge PCB settlement, and we went to the river a lot. So I grew up eating fish out of the river that now I get the privilege to protect. And so as I got into this job about 13 years ago, we got some funding to do angler surveys. So all of this really started with realizing that we needed to start asking anglers what they knew about fish consumption advisories. Because if my family, who was involved in that settlement and was directly impacted by that known carcinogen, was unaware that there were fish consumption advisories, how many other families were. So we started with an angler survey and started to collect data and build resources that we felt like were going to be able to help people understand the fish consumption advisories. And to be honest, we stumbled into policy. Like at that point, I really didn't have the creativity to think that the data we were collecting could be translated into a piece of legislation. And so last year, so 2023, we had a gentleman from my watershed actually introduce the bill, and we've been fighting tooth and nail since then to get that across the finish line.
Nice. So going back, how did you build the relationships with the angler community in the river basin to collect this data? What did that look like?
It was, honestly, it took a lot of time. I spent several years walking up to random dudes at fishing piers, asking them what they had caught that day, trying to build a rapport with them. Because when it's someone's respite or their recreation, the last thing I want to do is discourage them to not enjoy fishing.
Right.
I want to empower them with the data to make informed decisions. So it took a long time. The Coosa is one of the most heavily fished rivers in Alabama, the river state. And so, culturally, connecting with anglers was really, really important because those are the folks that are on the river first thing in the morning,
right,
and at last light, and they tend to know when the river is discolored or where the pipes are, because that might be where the fish migrate. So disproportionately more anglers submit pollution reports to us than any other population. So it felt very important that we go to them versus trying to lure, like pun intended, them to us.
Yeah. And how do you think, how has Coosa Riverkeeper sort of built that awareness, or how have over time, how has Coosa Riverkeeper been building those relationships so that anglers, people who are out fishing, that they know that you exist, so that if they see something they're concerned about, they know that there's somebody they can call?
Yeah, well, I've been to a lot of bass tournaments.
Really? Okay.
So that was a natural place to start, was going to the tournaments and seeing which of the folks that were coming to fish in them were actually homegrown Coosa men and women. And a lot of them were. So a lot of it was just making them aware that we kind of started with talking to them about dissolved oxygen levels, because any angler in the summer is going to want to know, especially in the Southeast, what the dissolved oxygen levels were. So we were like, hey, we collect this water quality data that can be meaningful to you. And by the way, do you eat the fish, or does someone that you know eat the fish? And so that helped us find public access points that we were unaware of, because there were places that they were like, yeah, we see people fishing at Silver Run Road in Talladega and X, Y, or Z place. So we started that way. And then it really started to blossom when we started doing the surveys, because the surveys were very specific to location, trying to really identify where subsistence anglers were, but also the consistency of, they knew if they were at the dam, someone from Coosa Riverkeeper is going to come up, offer a bottle of water, offer them a lure. And then if they were to participate in the survey, provide them follow-up information.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think that it's probably like for folks who aren't familiar with the Coosa, why is it such a big fishing destination? Like why is fishing such a big deal for folks when it comes to the Coosa?
Well, I think that there's probably 3 reasons. First of all, the fish that are found in my river basin are angry, fighting spotted bass.
Fun to fish.
So they are fun to catch. The second thing is that the Coosa is really a series of reservoirs. So the Coosa, our organization was founded in 2010 because the Coosa had the greatest mass extinction in modern North American history when it was dammed. So those series of reservoirs have created lots of opportunities for fish habitat, specifically for the Alabama bass, spotted bass. Red eye bass are very hot right now in my watershed. And then finally, I think it's part of a tradition of what it is to be an Alabamian. Lots of folks look to our rivers for fun, but they're also important places for providing supper and self-reliance for many families that, I affectionately call the hook and bullet crowd, because those are the people that are looking to the river maybe a little bit differently than birders or hikers. The way that they interact with the outdoors is a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about the Safe and Healthy Outdoor Recreation Act. Like what does the act do? What's it, if it gets passed, when it gets passed, what's it?
Yeah. When it gets
when
passed.
When it gets passed, what is this act going to do for all Alabamians, but also for folks that live in the Coosa River Basin?
Yeah, so the most important part of this piece of legislation is to codify the Fish Consumption Advisory Program. Right now, we've got 3 state agencies that are all saying "not my job" and pointing fingers at each other. And unfortunately, Alabamians are the ones having to fish for answers when it comes to understanding the advisories. So by codifying it, it will ensure that it goes on forever. And right now, it's quite vulnerable for funding and staff time between these agencies. Second, it will allow folks to get this information more easily, whether that be through digital and non-digital options. Because right now, if you wanted to figure out where fish were safe to eat, you would need to go to the Alabama Department of Public Health's website and download like a 30-plus page PDF.
Wow.
Well, 25% of my watershed doesn't have broadband internet access. So how are they supposed to arm themselves with that information when there's those technological barriers? So that would be, in this bill, it would have signs at public access points with pictures of the fish. Because we want to be inclusive and mindful of literacy as well as language barriers, in addition to technological barriers. As well as when you get a fishing license, get this information when you get your license.
Oh, good.
So it's, it's been frustrating because I think people that are opposed to this bill think that we're trying to discourage people from fishing. When in fact, we are trying to make sure that this information that our state agencies are curating is meeting the people who need it the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are you finding are some of the more persuasive arguments that you're able to make in order to build support for this in the state legislature?
I think one of the most important things is educating folks that you cannot look at a fish and know if it's safe to eat. Just like you can't look at a water body and know if it's safe to swim in just by looking at the water color or clarity or their lack of. So I think just educating people when they eat the fish that there's not going to be an acute sickness. Like a lot of folks will be like, well, I haven't sprouted a third arm yet. Well, I hope not.
Right.
But like that's unlikely with PCBs or neurotoxins to grow a new appendage. But it is really, really important, I think, that we continue to consistently remind them that just because they don't eat fish from the river doesn't mean that there aren't people who do. And that's why those angler surveys have been really important, because I'm able to go meet with the Coosa River delegation, so to speak, and say, these folks, you're the folks that voted you in office. This is what they're saying that they know about the advisories. And I've also been able to take some of these elected officials out on our patrol boat and show them the people that are using our river for food.
Oh, that's great. And well, so, I mean, hearing you talk about it, it's so important. It's absolutely necessary information that people should have. So are you finding that there's opposition, or, how are you, what are some of the barriers that you're encountering, and how are you working to break those barriers down?
Well, let's start with barriers. The barriers are time. We have not spent as a movement in Alabama a lot of time building power and relationships in Montgomery. And unfortunately, the people that are opposed to this bill, which tend to be big industry, have a lot of money and a lot of time to send people down there and build those relationships with elected officials. So I'd like to reframe that barrier as an opportunity and continue to find more funders that are interested in this long game that we're working towards to build power for the conservation movement in Alabama. Another barrier is, we have a we're very young sort of class of legislators right now that are still trying to figure out who and how they are and how they can or can't be influenced by dark forces out there. And then in terms of the opposition, the first year we got this thing through the House, through the Senate. I mean, it was a breeze. I was like, this is how it's going to be. This is great. This year, on the other hand, we have had heavy opposition from industry groups, as well as some of our state regulatory agencies. That has been more disheartening than I can really articulate. And the big industry that you would imagine are the same ones that are leaving leaking coal ash on my river. They're the same ones that make it incredibly difficult to paddle below the Coosa River and Jordan Dam. So we are working really diligently and really strategically about when we want to be seen and not seen as we still work on building those relationships with elected officials.
Yeah. And so, working on policy change, it's not a quick or an easy process. It takes time. So what have you found is the sort of what's needed in order to I guess sustain and build the movement over the long term? Like, how do you, stay for yourself and for, your fellow advocates? Like, what are the keys to being able to sort of sustain the momentum over the long term that it takes to build that power and work towards that change over the long term?
That's a good question. I mean, for me, I think it's structure. Like, I need structure as a person and as a leader. Because it provides me a roadmap to remind myself where I'm going on those days where I feel like I'm just spinning in the mud. So I think creating some structure and taking diligent notes about what worked and what didn't in terms of that structure is important, especially in the moments where we feel maybe a little bit groundless. Because as you know, doing policy and legislative work, things change so quickly. They have to pivot so quickly. The comms have to change. So learning how to not white knuckle those moments and sort of embrace the flow, I think is really important. But also, I think for me, being in Montgomery, that is not my natural habitat.
Yeah.
All right. Like, it's just not.
Yeah.
So having those in-district meetings, I think is really, really important. Taking them to the wastewater treatment plant. Taking them to the fishing pier that I know that we're going to find Larry sitting on a bucket at. So, and being able to say, hey, Larry, this is elected official X. Did you vote for him? You know what I'm saying? And like creating that grassroots and grass tops connection through bringing people together on the river is what I think sustains me.
That seems like such a powerful tactic. Are there other strategies and tactics that you would recommend to fellow advocates, whether no matter what kind of political environment that they're working in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you should bring company with you when you go visit these elected officials. Bring in, and then for me, it's like, I want dudes in camo and in fishing shirts down there with me, because it's really easy for industry and our opposition to make us look a certain way, especially in a very red state. We are others to them. But if I'm able to bring folks that look like them, that talk like them, that vote like them, I think it increases cohesion about that rivers are something that belong to all of us. It should not be a political issue to know where your fish are safe to eat or not. But unfortunately, these industries are making it not just a political issue, but for them, it's an economic issue. So they don't want to be held accountable to the pollution that they're causing, which is causing the fish to be unsafe to eat.
Yeah.
So by bringing folks together, I'd like to think that can empower everyone, because it's really easy to feel, at least in Alabama, a bit disillusioned with the political process. And a lot of people don't think that their voice matters and counts. And I'd like to do something about that.
Well, and I think that's like such an important point to sort of end on, is that, building power is really about each and every one of us feeling like and knowing that our voice, our vote, the things that we care about, our community, our children, our parents, all of that is so important to us. And we've got to all work together. And that's what we have to work together to use our collective voice and build our collective power.
Yeah. And be present and be consistently present. Because I think that's really what made him nervous this year, is that last year we were just down there every so often. But this year we were consistent in our presence in Montgomery. And I think that consistency in itself is building power, because if they're spending money to fight us on even the smallest things, then I think that means that it's working. Yeah. Or at least that's what I tell myself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Justinn, thank you so much for telling us your story. Thank you so much for everything that you do just to be an advocate and a mobilizer amongst people in your community, and for everything you do. And for those of us who are listening today to Justinn's story, we encourage you to spend some time with River Network State Policy Hub. We're going to be sharing Justinn's story and her words of wisdom alongside with several other stories of policy advocacy across the network. So thank you, Justinn.
Thank you.